Welcome to this week's episode of the Human AF podcast. Today I'm so happy to share part one of a two-part conversation with my dear friend and incredible psychic and intuitive mentor, Ahsaki Kai. Together we dive straight into the heart of intuition, what it means to be intuitive, the different ways intuitive guidance shows up, and how inner healing and shadow work can be a powerful tool for clearing blocks that get in the way of trusting yourself and the guidance moving through you. So get cozy and settle in for part one, because when we get together, no topics are off base, sharing how we each learned how to tap in, how to follow and trust our intuition, especially during confusing and uncertain times. So without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome. Hi to this week's episode of the Human AF podcast with my very special guest, Ahsaki Kai. Renowned psychic, mental health practitioner turned, seer and supporter of seers to be.
I like that. Seers to be.
I just made that up. That intuitively came to me. I have been wanting to have this conversation for a long time, and both of us are like, why haven't we had it sooner? But here we are. And a little bit about, if you're new to me, my name is Keri-Anne Livingstone. I'm a clarity coach, and I'm here to sort of clear the path for you to have a deeper understanding of yourself, trust yourself, so that you can take that which is in you out into the world in a way that is aligned and true and just creates abundance and better, like putting things back in better order from the inside out, you know? So I've never really described it like that, but that is how I want to talk about it today. And I'm so glad you're here, Ahsak, because we go back. Is it a decade? No, it feels like a decade, but I think it was after my dad, because I don't think we knew each other when my dad died, but we knew each other after my dad died.
True. That is
okay. So then that timeline's at 2016.
Reading about it. Yeah. And it's the videos that I have from class are 2017, if that puts it in. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I stumbled upon you either through a Jill Prescott or I'm not quite sure it was. Okay. And I signed up for a call with you right away. And immediately you blew my mind and I was just in a lot of expansion at that point because my father had passed away. And I was having some incredibly spiritually transformative experiences that I was trying to reconcile. Like, what does that mean? What does it all mean? What is this information that I've got? How do I use it? Because big things crack us open to either receive new information or all of a sudden it's coming out of us and we're just like, okay, it's just discombobulating, right? So you met me at that time when I was really just opening up and starting to admit that there's more here and I don't know what to do with it. So back then you were running these intuitive development classes, and that's how we met. And then I met you through the reading, and then I took your intuitive development class, and it really just validated so much normal things, like normalcy. Is that a word? It's like there were things that I didn't know were normal, but you were like, that you normalized a lot of things that I didn't realize were intuitive. And I was like, that? And you're like, yeah, that. And I was like, oh my God, that's always there. It was like something that I would just step over and not see as an intuitive anything. Yes. And so there was so much learning there. And you have this ability to see into the stars, see into the future, see into the potential that is the person you're reading, which is wild to me. And we have had such a journey, like professionally, client, vice versa, client, practitioner, you for me for you, and also a friendship, but learning through each other and how we each have entered and moved through intuitive work together. So if you haven't already guessed it, this episode is about intuitive exploration. We're going to explore what it is to each one of us to hopefully offer you guys some clarity around that and some accessibility. And some understanding about what it is and what it isn't. So I thank you for being here. And I also know that you come from academically, social work, mental health work. So you've been in the system as well. So you've had this one foot, you started there. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your journey and where you are today. So.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna do a formal introduction because I'm horrible about stuff like this. My name is Ahsaki Kai, surname Brown, for those of you who are like, isn't she really? Yes, last name is Brown. Kai is my middle name. My first and middle name mean beautiful love. It is Swahili. I feel like I've been named for this work for a really long time, and I didn't quite get that until I was really about 40. Um, my background has been social work, case management, a lot of case management, serving probably every disenfranchised population that you could think of, from reincarcerate from, you recently incarcerated to homelessness to women with kids, people who may have been in domestic violence situations, all kinds of things. I come from a family that has been in the trenches of social work, kind of work, for a very, very long time, generationally speaking. My mom worked for Head Start. I know when I was in the work, what I know for sure is I didn't have the degrees at the time. I beat out master's degrees, PhDs for much of the work that I did in no more than one place. And what I knew for sure was what I know for sure now that I didn't really fully understand then is, even then, everything I was doing was intuitive. Everything. So where else would I get it from? I mean, granted, I had family exposure and some level of, oh, okay, you do the things that serve your community, but the ins and outs of the actual work, it just came naturally. And I remember mentors saying that to me, including clinicians. They're like, you just seem to kind of have a knack for this thing, because it was something that just divinely moved through me because it was where I was meant to be. It took me a long time to understand those things about myself, but now that I do, looking back at those moments, I'm like, my goodness, this thing has been the boilerplate, the foundation all along to every part of what I've done. I just didn't get that necessarily when I was in it because I was too young to understand it. I didn't have enough exposure to what is intuition. Um, I also had parents who allowed me a great deal of latitude and freedom. When I was a kid, I used to read books on astrology since I was probably about 11 years old. I have shamanic books even to this day that were from when I was 18 and 19 years old. So I say all of that to say I've always kind of leaned in these alternative science directions or holistic directions, even if it wasn't what was, what is now pretty mainstream. A lot of what we do is very out there. A lot of people see this stuff all the time and want to be participating in it. Anyway, um, I went to a retreat now probably close to 15 years ago. I have always been, probably since my early 20s, I've always been of the mind, you get your bolts tightened all the time, mentally speaking. So you go to therapy, you go to retreats. It was just a standard way of living for me from age 20 onward because, I could afford it. It was on my radar and it was what you do at that time, especially because I worked with a lot of mental health practitioners. So everybody looked at me and said, yeah, of course, I go to therapy because I'm a therapist. So I'm just following good measure, good metrics and measurement of what was around me and doing what they did. But flash forward to being in Atlanta. So where what I'm speaking to is really my old life in upstate New York. Flash forward to being in Atlanta, and my former mentor invited me to a retreat. It was basic. I just assumed it to be shadow work. Instead, it was a weekend of really divine guidance, getting in touch with your guardian angels, your spirit guides, passed on loved ones. My grandmother was there the entire time, literally. And there was a whole other event happening with my entire family where, in my mind, because I hadn't discovered, like, oh, they're everywhere all the time. I'm thinking, how is she here when all my family's down there? And I'm like, she's in both places. But nonetheless, it was a major turning point for me where I realized, oh, this thing is on and this is very real. I had never done psychic work or intuitive work professionally up until that point. I just played around in it a lot. Tarot cards, mahjong cards, anything you can think of. I've always been drawn to it. I just couldn't necessarily tell you that it was in me. It was not unlike how some people approach religion. It was something outside of me. So it was this outer layer that I didn't really fully understand was really soul. That's what's driving the bus to all of this. So I say all of that to say, my discovery process really has been through the enthusiasm, if you will, picture that enthusiasm for shadow work, but my enthusiasm for doing other processes is usually what took me to the intuitive work. That was just a bonus, like this big giant bonus of discovering who I really am and figuring out, oh, you have this gift and it really has been turned on all along. Now you're getting a sense of really how to use it. From that point forward, from that retreat onward, I was practicing how to do it professionally, and converging everything I knew from social work and case management along with all of that, all of this new ability, to tap in, to hear people, to hear the things, to hear the information. And the last 15 years of my life have really been about converging those two things and also recognizing the differences and the distinct similarities between psychic and psychology. Because when we're talking about social work, we're talking about mental health clinicians, and these things are way more closely aligned, I think, than sometimes we realize. But
And the
yes,
system, sorry, but you're just like, you're bumping up against systems and society and
yes. And now that we're at a place where we say to everyone, go to therapy, this is important. You should do that for yourself. It's good, just good mental hygiene, to go to therapy. We're going to go way down, and that's a good thing that people are now engaging much more than ever in therapy. However, the therapeutic process is not necessarily fully enveloped in the
yeah.
holistic processes yet. So very often those two things can butt heads. And my hope over the next decade is that we are on the forefront of getting people to see where those two worlds really closely align and are two ends of the same stick. In other words, they're not enemies, they're really friends. Like the
Well,
narcissist.
that there's harmony in the, it's like a
Yes,
tuba doesn't get mad at a clarinet. You know what I mean? Like they're a part of the same
exactly.
orchestra, and that
Exactly.
there's no competing there. There's placement, there's timing, but there is harmony. There's
Yes.
possible harmony. But if those two things don't know that they belong together, they're going to combat one another, or they're going to assume the other one shouldn't belong.
Yep. And
Well,
that's really not the case. They can coexist quite magnificently. And one gets better, the psychic automatically gets bigger, better, more clear the further up the scale on the mental health side that you go. So the irony is when you're doing the shadow work, whether it's in the therapist's office or the shaman's mountain, you're expanding your ability to hear, see, think, feel, and sense what's actually happening. So it's a win-win.
yeah. So no wonder. So you're just throwing light bulbs off in me because, well, I know that to be true because I started my coaching practice with a lot of shadow work. It
Yes.
felt very big to hold because I was like, I'm very intense. Like I'm a new coach and I'm coming out. Like, let's go into the depths of hell. Um, I didn't really understand why that I was so compelled. But the
Yeah.
more I did my own work, because you have to when you are, I say you have to, you don't have to, I guess. But for me, in my values, I had to make sure I was going to places that I wanted to help other people go within myself and at least hold that. But what
Yes.
I learned was over time, this whole intuitive piece around working with others, it was mentioned in coach training, let's say, as it was. But I was always fascinated with how in tune some of the coaches were. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, that was really out of nowhere that they said, or out of pocket that they said that very
Right.
specific thing. And the client goes, are you kidding me? And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. But the
Right.
more work I did with myself, the more I was getting information that I didn't know where it was coming from. And so
Mm-hmm.
it totally lines up now. When you and I met, my father had just passed, and and he was the root, father daughter relations are already, rooted in, I don't know what the word is, but they're rooted and
Yeah.
foundational. And whether you get along or not, and I want to say, unfortunately, he'd laugh at that, but unfortunately, we got along very well and we were very
Yeah.
connected. It was
Yeah.
unfortunate for me because it was such a big root for me to feel leave,
Mm-hmm.
um, to feel leave on a human level, right?
Yeah.
Because I know now, I know he hasn't really gone. I understand that more, but that's only from the work I've done to expand my insides to then open up to that connection. But at the time, it was such a fundamental bikini wax that I never asked for. Um, with all these open follicles, all of this information was now moving at a much more concentrated level. hearing things and sensing things that I was like, I have no business knowing that about whatever's being talked about around me. And how do I share it? How do I be responsible with that? Is it my place? But it opens up the conversation of like, because I'm in this work, how do I hold that? So that's maybe another conversation for another time. But either way, when you start, whether you're in relationship with somebody, well, you start understanding things about, like, you're getting information, then it's important to learn how to share it in a way that's sovereign, that's safe, that is
Yeah.
respectful of you and them. And so that's maybe another conversation, but that was sort of where we were meeting. And I was like, how do I understand all of these aspects that are showing themselves to me? So it lines up with your story very similarly, which I didn't realize we shared that. And I loved hearing that. I don't think I've actually heard your kind of origin story, your superhero origin story, which was here. Now you all know that's how this happened. And like,
Yeah.
wow, like how wild for you, because I always see how you and I like work, work with intuition, very differently. I've always, now this is just me being very human. When I first met Ahsaki, it was like, putting her way up here because she sees things that she had no right, not no right. She had no business in knowing that, but she knows it.
Sure.
So she's this very magical creature and like higher than, better than, has all the information. Um, and I put myself at a lower level, and we'll do this with practitioners anyway, people that hold space for that. And, working with you, and as the years have gone by, our relationship has helped me see like how unnecessary that is, and how I was always comparing my gift or my, like, what I was getting, even in the development classes.
Yep.
I was like, look into all the other students. Oh, it sounds like that for them. And well, then it doesn't sound like that for me. And like just this weird, so we're going to talk about some of the myths, and bust them. But
I remember
yeah,
when you
it's,
told me that. I remember when you told me that when we were actually in class together, you changed the way I did work because it hadn't occurred to me that other people were trying to emulate me. Like it hadn't occurred to me like, oh, they're seeing this and they want to do exactly what I do. No, that's not why we're here. We're here for you to do the thing that I do your way because it's meant to funnel through your system and become your soul speak. It's not meant to look like what I do, but I didn't know that people were even thinking that. And I was several cycles into the class by then. I'm going, oh, I gotta start. So thank you, because you made me realize, oh, that's why they're competing in class, like we're in double dutch or something. And I'm like, why is this happening? I didn't understand it because it hadn't, in my own humility, human as fuck. I don't think I'm this. I just think I'm a girl who's really psychic, and I'm trying to show you how to be psychic too. And then you're going to take it and do all these miraculous things. But there's a soul revealing process that's happening through the whole thing for you, for me, for the people that learn from us, whether it was 2017, 2019, 20 now, 20, 30 years from now, all the time there's this cycle happening. So we're all doing this soul reveal at our different paces, but you helped me with that part tremendously. From then, I really understood to start telling people, oh, you got to look for how this gift looks for you. And then I started honing that part. So you really helped me shape the practitioner aspects of what I do. Because without that, I would not have understood that that's what people were seeing. And I know I have a Leo rising. So I'm Mufasa sometimes, like I get that. I understand that. But that's not what this gift is about at all. If it gives the razzle daddle, awesome. Like that's great for the internet, for IG, for, Clubhouse, whatever. But this is deep embodied soul work. It really is. Everything about intuition is about the revelation of the soul. As once we can do that part and be okay with that and knowing that everybody's soul has an entirely different imprint and a whole different message and very different astrology, then we can proceed with this sense of, oh, I'm revealing me, not my teacher, not the person who happens to be facilitating this, which is now so many of us, right? It's not about becoming that. It's about becoming a variation of whatever this soul speak is, and then trusting it because you've evolved it that much. Sorry.
I hope y'all are writing this down, because I'm like, I'm glad we're recording it.
Oh, me
because
too.
you just spit some major quotables. Yeah, amazing.
That's good.
Wow,
Oh, my
yeah,
dog
man.
just sat
Because
up and
I
looked
mean,
at me like, "Ooh,
we
what you doing over there?"
it's like we're talking about it in the same ways, but we just show up to it so differently, which is how it should be and how it's meant to be. And I think it's a big deal to hand that over to somebody. And I think it's almost like a form of receiving that we choke on when someone tells me, no, you get to do this your way. And I'm like, well, I don't know what my fucking way is. You know, I'm like, I don't want don't put that on me. Just tell me, you know what I mean? Like there's this element of, I don't want that responsibility to see it.
Yep,
I don't want to get it wrong. I mean,
yep,
I get that, you know, why people struggle is I don't want to get it wrong.
right,
If what I sense and feel,
yep,
what if it's wrong?
yep,
I mean, that whole, we can talk a little bit about that, but like, there's this belief system or this, this fear of we're going to get it wrong. And that only speaks to such a broad, the human race is that we have this idea that we're supposed to be right and we're supposed to get it right. What the hell? Like, we have not been raised in a society that encourages or supports creativity, which inherently is messy, which is inherently fuck around and find out and like see what works, see what doesn't, play with the mess, work from it all, and yet that is actually how it goes. But it's
yep,
almost like no one really wants to, not many people really want to talk about that unfolding process and how fumbly it is. And well, I know that I'm daring to suck. Like that is exactly where that came from,
mhm,
and divinely. And I was like, it's like when an idea moves through you and it chooses you, it was like, I'll do that. That aligns with me. Let's hop on that horse and ride. And that sort of,
yeah,
but that was intuitively delivered to me. And I thought it rang bells. And I was like, I'm supposed to pay attention to these words.
yeah,
What do I want to do with this? And I just ran with it and shared it and off we go. And here we are. But
yeah,
like, yeah. And I guess I always joke because I feel like you and I come at this from different bookends. Like, whereas when when I first met you, you shot me and my life out of a cannon, and you had me years down the road. Everybody pay attention to this. Ahsaki saw me traveling. She saw me teaching online. She saw me retreating with retreats. She saw like animals. She saw all sorts of things. Oh, she saw all sorts of things. You know what I mean? One of them, and this, we got to talk about this because this is really interesting. So some of that stuff absolutely happened. But here's the other thing. Now we're getting into another territory here, but
yep,
what I believe to be true about when you go to an intuitive
yep,
is that, well, at least I think, Ahsaki, your very unique job when it comes to one-on-one work with you,
yep,
is that one of your most amazing gifts and the biggest opportunity that you offer, especially people that are out in the healing and helping world,
yeah,
is that you help get us out of where we are and show us what is possible. So it's almost like you open up this antenna, you get given possibilities, potentials, ideas, very specific shit. And you share it. Your job is to share it and say, well, I'm getting this. And you've come up, listen, Keri, and you can argue with me all you want, but I'm seeing this, I'm smelling that, and I'm hearing that, and you're just like, you're so just,
that is so me.
no, you're just like so committed to whatever you get. And it's, to me, it's so brave and courageous and just like amazing. And I've learned so much from that. Because you're not attached to the outcome, because you have an understanding that that isn't your business. You're a messenger, you're a conduit. And so, it's helped me hold the information that I get and how I share my stuff and how it's different and wonderful. Tuba, clarinet.
I love it.
Pardon me. But what I was saying is, so what I think you do amazing when it comes to that type of one-on-one work, because I know there's a breadth to the stuff that you do, is that you deliver potentials and possibilities. And there's sometimes even percentages. It's like, oh, that's very high percentage. That's very
Mhm,
likely. Some of
yep,
this stuff is iffy, but it's like this feels a bit 50%, but that feels 90%.
mhm,
And you deliver that as well.
yep,
What that does for me as a human being is that it gets me out of where I'm at. It has me try it on. It's almost like I'm shopping perspectives.
yep,
And And as a very good client, it's like my job to try things on, notice what I kind of triggers me in a good way, like, oh, like, glimmers, like, oh, that's not,
Right.
I love how that expand, love that. Love
Yes.
that for me. Love
Yeah.
that for my family. Love that for us. And there's a choice that I have as a human being to
Oh,
pursue, to follow, to take action on things that you have strewn. So when it comes to homeschooling kids, there's this thing called strooning, or maybe I'm saying it wrong, but where you basically put things in front of kids, and it's almost like putting out tools and letting them choose which one they want, a hammer, or this or that. And their intuition grabs the thing that they want that's very authentic to them. And I feel like that's very much what happens on sessions with you. You're like, well, I see this and I see that. And I'm like, oh, well, that's wild and weird. Okay. And I'll take it in. Some stuff rings bells and I go, yes, but that's my intuition saying, start with that, start with that. I mean, you once said you saw me like channeling some Russian guy, and I was like, nope. Like, like I just sovereign and
yep.
no.
I don't want to.
And
Nope.
you and I together talked about like, I get to say no to that, right? And you were like, absolutely. I'm just telling you what I get.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah, because that at least right now, I was like, I say no to that. That does not, no. But you're like, but you could if you wanted to. Like, if you felt inclined, you could go learn about channeling, or,
Yep.
that specific entity or whatever,
Yep.
like Bashar or something. And I was like, yeah, no, thanks. I'm not up for that right now. And I decided to choose free will, my own fate, and other doors opened. But that's the opportunity, is that you got me out of what I thought was everything, and that's all it was,
Yep.
to like potential. And then it's up to me to choose, to decide to play with. And there it is. And
Yep.
then there have been moments. So that's very sort of macro, like you do that, which I
Yep.
think is an amazing gift that you have. Because it makes me, it's like championing in coaching. That tool is
Yeah.
like when you champion someone and you say, listen, I see you doing this. I'm not psychic, but it's like, but again, I also think that is a very intuitive thing to choose to do in a coaching session. I see you doing this. I envision this. And it takes the person out of their current perspective and have them
Mhm.
just for a vacation to try it on and be like, I like how that feels. I love that. And as soon as they choose the thing to try it on, they're fundamentally changed immediately.
There you go.
And they don't know that because they've left that perspective.
Change realities.
You
They
can't put the
literally are
genie
choosing
back.
another timeline.
You can't put the genie back in the bottle. So
There
as
you
soon as your
go.
instincts and intuition go, oh, I love that. Oh my God, I'm expanded
Right?
into it. I'm
Yep.
expanded into it. And they're like, so that's what you've done. And so I do it in different ways. And then they're like, and I'm like, so anyway, so where were we in there? And they're just like, well, I can't
Yep.
go back to, oh shit. They're like, well, okay, now I'm out. Now I'm out of that. So, okay, new place, new chapter. And it's like,
Yep.
okay, well, let's work from here. And I just think that's fascinating that
Yep.
that is what happens in this work. And it's not just intuitive work. I just think intuition is everywhere. It's woven into all the fibers. So I think I sort of feel like I got a bit off track there, but maybe I didn't. I'm going to trust what
Right
comes
on
out and
time.
how it comes out.
Yeah. I think you're
But I
perfect.
love that about,
Yeah.
and then just so you know, there'll be moments where you've been so specific and you've been like, I see you, like, I have to tell you guys, she saw caves at one point. She saw me going to a retreat. And I was like, what? She's like, well, it's somewhere on the West Coast. She didn't know where I lived at this point. And
Yep.
I lived on the West Coast.
Yep.
And it's got caves, and it's like, it's very like First Nations based and all these things. And oh my God, it's amazing. And like, if you find out about it, tell me about it. Cause I see myself there, and oh, and I see so-and-so, and I see so-and-so. And she named a couple people that
Yep.
I knew. And I was like, okay. So I went looking for this retreat, thinking it was a retreat I was supposed to go to. Couldn't find it. Months later, another intuitive friend of mine said, hey, do you have a retreat that you would love to like put on, but you haven't because you're just weird and you're just in your own way? And I was like, oh yeah, I just wrote it all out. But I'm like, I just put it away. And I thought, oh, she's like, oh, go talk about it and it'll sell out overnight.
Yep.
So I did. It sold out overnight. And then I found the venue. I was all ass backwards to front because that's how I do things. And that's how this goes. And it was the first one. And it wasn't until after I secured everything and everybody signed up that I found out there were caves down the road. And guess who was there? Ahsaki was there, and the
Yep.
other people she named, but
Yep.
not because I made it so. They literally stepped, it was crazy specific. But the thing was, I received the information with loose hands. I let it play out, and I trusted whatever crossed my path and paid attention. And
Yeah.
that's the game. Whether it's
Yes.
you're being offered intuitive information or you're working
Intuiting
with it
itself. Yep.
from within.
Yep. That's it. It is so interesting to me. And I've really learned this through my own journey, but also watching clients, observing clients, studying as they're going through, okay, I got this piece of information. What do I do with the data now? That's what it's data. It's all data. And the data is really truly multiple streams of consciousness. You have infinite choices, and these are the ones that you're creating the loudest. It is no different from taking a person to the blackjack table in Vegas and going, tell me what the numbers are. That's literally what we do as intuitives. It's see, tap into the thing that you, whatever person is across the table or on the phone, is
Mhm.
tapping into the most. In other words, I'm not so much seeing and I say this a lot on the phone with my clients. I'm not creating this for you. You've already created it yourself. So even all four of those people being there at the same time, and some of us not knowing one another, we were already in agreement even before you put out an invitation to come to this event. That's how so many things are in alignment, and we are so often questioning that part of the process, going, no, because our logic would tell us that can't be a thing, right? Everything about our logic would say, that's not real. First of all, she doesn't have a retreat. We would go through all the logical steps. Well, there are no caves, or I haven't seen any caves on a map or whatever. So there are so many ways we can negate the information that was originally received by creating doubt. And we create that doubt through our logical brains. And like that just doesn't add up. And what I find more so than anything else happens, and now it has become a source of great humor to me, I won't even lie. When I'm talking to clients or whomever I'm talking to and giving them predictions, and they say to me, this is my favorite phrase now, oh, I can't imagine that. Did you pay me so you could imagine? No, you paid me so that we could talk about what you are currently manifesting. Doesn't matter if you can see it or not. It doesn't matter. And sometimes people aren't at that intuitive place where they can, like you tell them a thing and they're like, yeah, okay, I could see that in my mind's eye. Not every client is that guy. Sometimes I have folks who are, I can't imagine that could be a thing. I don't know how that's even possible. And that's okay too, as long as they walk away with the understanding that it is possible. If you said something kind of magical just now about taking your hands off it and letting it just show you what it is. In religion, how do they say that? It's like,
Let go
um,
and let God.
yeah, like God has bigger plans for you than you know. And there's some truth to that. When I read to
100%.
people, I get the response. Remember Morocco? Morocco's like my turning point moment for me and you because it taught me a lot in that moment about how
What do you
far.
mean by, if people don't know what you're talking about, what do
Oh,
you mean
right.
by
Oh,
Morocco?
good Lord. Right. Thank you. So context, COVID, middle of the pandemic. Keri-Anne, her entire family are in Morocco looking to possibly lead. And this is when like all the planes shut down, everybody was in their
That's
respective
when it was at
countries.
the beginning. It was the very
Yeah,
first beginnings of we got stuck in Morocco.
right. I'm thinking it was probably like February or March of
It was
like,
March. I can tell you it was March 17th when they
okay.
closed the borders. Yeah.
Okay.
St.
Okay.
Patrick's Day was my niece's birthday.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. So we've got some good marker points for what that was. Thank you for that because
Yeah.
I would not have been able to place that otherwise. Um, and it was a scary kind of situation, like it was unnerving. Like, okay, the borders are closing. How do we get home? I'm on the other end of these calls. Now, mind you, I'm fully aware that your family is talking to you, going, come home right now. Come home. You have to come home. And I am contradicting Carrie Ann's mom. This is not a
Mhm.
comfortable place for me. Carrie's my friend, number one. Number two,
Yeah.
as a psychic, these are the moments where, as detached as I can be, it's uncomfortable because you're talking about very real life, very emergent, very frightening, very new to all of us. It's not like we've all done a pandemic before. This was weird. You know what I mean? By all accounts, like, okay,
Yeah.
this is the kind of moment where, as a practitioner, you go, don't F this up. Seriously, make sure, check 500 times, make sure you're giving her the right data. And I remember getting to a moment in the conversation where I said to you, Keri, what's your soul really telling you? Not
Oh,
what all these.
okay, okay. I want to talk about from this. So hold that pin right there. That moment where
Yes,
you said that to me on the phone.
yeah,
What led up to that conversation
Yes.
was, and I need to talk about this in the way that people, how intuition works. Now, some myths would say for you to tap into your intuition, you need to light the candles. Ironic. Look at this candle. You got to put yoni on. You got to, have a bath. You got to meditate. You got to chant. You got to do body work. Jesus Murphy. You know what I mean? Like, but
Right.
I only speak these myths because I had these belief systems, and like for optimal clarity,
Right.
I need to season the room and like sage what, like all this pomp and circumstance. It's like,
Yeah.
in order for the information to come. Now here I was. So there's that. Here's the thing. There is a place for that. Don't get me wrong.
There
I
is.
think the place for that is when you're very curious and you want to open up to information and you're asking it to come in. For sure, set the scene all you want.
Yeah.
And it isn't always in, so intuition will come very clear, very, very clear, very, very urgent at times when you're cornered. Now, we found ourselves behind closed borders. My whole
Yep.
family had sat down and we talked about how we were, honestly, we felt fine. We weren't worried. We were actually fine. We made a
Yeah.
collective decision as a family that we were going to stay
Yep.
until I got some information from my family and I started to feel and not buy into, but consider their
Right.
perspective. It
Perspective.
threw me off what had felt complete and aligned with my family.
Yep.
We were so stressed. We were being contacted by airlines, where we were contacting airlines and we weren't getting on flights. And that's a whole other thing. But like there were MPs working on our behalf in British
Right.
Columbia. Like we were trying, there was things happening, but like, we were like, okay, no, the thing that felt right to everyone, including my kids, was let's just stay put. This actually feels okay now that we've got a place and we're secure. And it was that night that it all got stirred up again because someone came into my, from my family and got me, which is fine.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, it was all very high energy. And
It was
I kind of got
very high
hooked,
impact.
which is
Yeah.
normal. And I did a 180. And while everybody was sleeping, I decided we were going to the airport. And I started packing everybody's bags. I was packing everybody's bags. I was frantic. And it was 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Scott started to get sick that night.
Remember that?
Do you remember
I
that?
do. I remember that.
And it was
I remember
when
being
I heard
terrified.
him go to the bathroom and he started coughing and I
Mm.
knew. And guess what? He was in the bathroom and I heard in my head, he's got it. And it
Oh,
was not my voice. And I went cold
yeah.
because I had known that he had been out in the village that day. And someone had sneezed on him and he was like, he mentioned it. He's like, listen, I got a whole lot of humanity all over me and no one's wearing masks out there. And it's freaking like,
Oh,
it was somebody was signing a paper for us and it was that close. It was some like notary thing for the
yeah.
landlord that we were staying with.
Oh, geez.
Anyway, and that was when I was like, what? And I was cornered. And but the more I packed, the more I couldn't think, the more I couldn't function. Everything started to close down. And
Mm-hmm.
that's intuition. You know what I mean? Like I just thought I was having a mental breakdown. But the
Right.
harder things got, the more I
Mm-hmm.
was, and I just was in a corner. So drastic measures. I'm calling, I'm trying to get more information to get
Right.
out of whatever this is. I called you. Thank God you answered. And I was like, help me out. And you just sat me down and you asked me that one question. And it had me return to the thought and the feeling that it had about 6 hours before. And I admitted what that was, but it went against every wish of every person that cared about me because they were very scared and rightfully so.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I admitted that to you and I said, this is actually and I just breathed and I think I had a good effing cry.
Yeah.
What were you going to say? So now we're at that point. So what did that?
It was being able to separate myself
Mm.
and advise. That was probably one of the harder moments for me. The only other thing that I would think compares to that is when I have to tell someone that somebody's going to die. That's how intense it felt to me because we're friends and because I knew your mom was on me. I'm like, oh God, our whole family's.
Mm.
I literally thought at one point, her mother is going to hate me. Like they're gonna hate me. Why wouldn't they? I'm on the other end of the phone going,
The thing is,
relax,
but
just stay
that's
where you are. And it sounds
so
nuts.
here's the thing. So when we get it, that's very human. when we get into that mode, we actually think or believe we're in charge of someone else's free will. And we really
Right.
aren't. We
Right.
really aren't. And Ahsaki was never really responsible for that. She was showing up in the way that I asked her to, only to confirm how I already felt. She was merely representing a mirror for me to bounce my, because she asked a question. Do you know, she didn't tell me what to do. You actually
Right.
didn't tell me what to
Right.
do. You
Right.
asked me a question and you said, what does your soul? As soon as you said it, it returned me to the conversation I'd had with my family 6 hours earlier. So do you see how no one is like, that's the opportunity. And as a good and sovereign, practitioner, you understand respecting other people's, sovereignty, free will. You give
Yep.
opportunity and you give opening and you give chance. And because there are no mistakes. If I
There are.
had pushed through, I would have had another experience and it would have sent me in another direction. The
Yep.
feeling I was having in my body was that experience was, it actually launched me at one point into the airport. It showed me what the airport was going to be like, which was scary as hell. It was
Mhm.
literally body to body, thousands of people, up against each other, breathing, yelling, crying, freaking out. It
Right.
was insane. It was all over the news in Marrakesh. And I was like, why would I take my children who are comfortable sleeping in their beds? We're in a gated community. We have a golf course available to us. We have fresh water. We have clean water. We have food in the fridge. We have what? There's no lineups. There's no missing stuff on the shelves. Everywhere else it was panic. So why would we? So that was hard to admit to people in my life. So it wasn't a feel good intuitive moment. It was and that's some of the stuff I want to break up for
Mhm.
people, is to understand that it isn't, it might be expansive. Yes, that expanded us into the thing that we were meant to do, which was
Right.
have that fucking adventure. And it was
Yep.
wild and we didn't know what we were doing. And that was part of it. And yes, it was stressful and we moved through it. But like, it was deeply, it showed me the difference between when I'm aligned and when I'm not.
Right.
Even when the sense of it, there
Yep.
was so much sense that my family was making. The news, all of it makes lots of sense.
Oh
But
God,
to
yeah.
my body,
Hmm.
no, no.
Yeah.
And so I was stuck in the middle. And as soon as
Yeah.
you asked, what does your soul want? It gave me the answer again. And I was almost annoyed by it, but also like, I'm going to have to trust myself to move through this. And all you had to do was anchor me into a soul perspective. And I realized I'm okay no matter what. I am who I am. He is who he is. My husband, we are
Yep.
a good team. It had me um, mobilize all the resources that were available to me. I have friends like you, and I have family, and they will understand. And this will be hard to explain to them, and we will get through it. And that was, oh boy, that was a cornered moment.
Yeah, it really, really was. And you just said something really important about when intuition shows up. Sometimes it shows up when we are in the corner, when we are back against the wall. That is often when it comes, and it feels to me like many of us are least likely to listen in those moments because we're trying to apply the logic that we know to a scary or an uncomfortable situation to hurry up and fix it. When we are cornered, we tend to let logic take over because it feels safe. It feels like it's the matrix. It's the performative, all of the programming that we've been handed that says this is how you do a thing. When we are cornered or when our back is up against the wall, we immediately revert back to that. So often, it's just basic human psychology, like do what's familiar because that's what works, right?
Do
Uh,
what's expected.
do what's
Do what
expected.
society expects.
Huge.
Do what the storybooks say. Do
Yep,
what the next part of the story that you were
exactly.
told in the movies or whatever it is.
Yes. Whatever Disney said.
Ah,
It's just such a false narrative because really what we know from intuition, from utilizing our intuition, and all of the ways that we've used it in, that really that God spark, that connection to the oneness of all of us that gives us that data, that information is literally foolproof. We simply question where it fits, whether we want to. And a lot of time, I don't think we realize we're actually debating our own free will. we're debating on whether we want to do a thing and making it a right or a wrong, when really it's just another choice.
God, so what I guess what you're, if I'm hearing you right, it's almost like we play the role of judge,
Mm,
as though I mean, that free will, yes. Like we do get to decide. We do get, so this is how I
mhm.
speak of it, we do get to decide. And and then guess what you're going to get? You're going to get feelings about your decision.
That's it.
And now, if you have a quasi fucked up relationship with your feelings, that's a whole other layer that needs to be
Mhm.
talked about. Because if you have a distorted or dysfunctional relationship with emotions or dysregulated,
Yeah,
then there is going to be a level of distrust,
right.
and lack of familiarity. And I don't
Yes.
want to go there or feel that way. So I will choose the thing that is familiar, even though it's another form of hell in its own, but
Mhm.
at least I know it. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know that this is the conversation we're having or debating in real time, but we're putting ourselves in a position of control, controlling the situation, thinking we can control the situation, playing judge and jury,
Yep.
gavel in hand. Let's weigh the options and we get to decide on a very logical level. Right now, if I was making that decision on a very logical level, I would have continued with the frantic, out of body, like out of just, I was out of my mind. I was
Yeah,
not myself.
right.
I was so uncomfortable in my skin. Every step I took, every piece of clothing I was putting into a bag,
Yeah,
I felt like I couldn't breathe. And I
yeah,
do not suffer from anxiety
right,
chronically, but it
right.
was choking me and it pushed me to call you. Like I'm shaking even thinking
I'm
about it.
sure. Yeah,
And
I
I
could
wanted to
feel that.
unzip. I wanted to be,
Yeah,
and so I knew something was up. I was like,
yeah,
something's up, but I
yeah.
needed the handrail that you are as a conduit, as a friend. And it doesn't always have to be, a world renowned psychic that you go to. I just have to be lucky to have your number and in a good relationship with you. And, to make the call. But, it's just to have that powerful question asked had me placed back in right order. And I'd already done enough, what do you call it, shadow work, clarity work to
Yes.
remember, okay, I'm back home. Oh shit, people are going to be unhappy. You know what I mean? Like, and okay,
Yeah.
so it, it's so interesting that you say we're going to choose logic because we get dipped into that soul place of knowing. We're like, well, that's going to open up a whole bunch of other doors that I don't know if. So I'm going to pop out because I'm either dysregulated or I'm not familiar with it. And I'm going to go to the familiar, even if it is equally and prolongedly uncomfortable and going to cause
Yes.
even more problems. But
Yeah.
in the meantime, it feels and sounds like a very acceptable thing to do. So
Yeah.
everyone happy, three-quarters happy, good enough for me. And then
Right. I've, I've I've heard people talk. I've had clients recently who spoke that way. Well, I can't have this, so I'll do this instead, and it's the settlement option. And I'm like, yeah, you're not going to want that in 4 months because that's not what your soul is guiding you towards. And I think we do get into a little bit of a grapple with ourselves over the soul speak versus what we think we know, from the world, from the people around us. It gets tricky. It does, especially if you haven't done. And for many of the people that we encounter, they will have done some shadow work possibly, but realistically, if they're at the beginning of their intuitive journey, a lot of the time shadow work is not where because one really kind of reflects the other. It's this dual dance that goes on between intuition and shadow work. So a lot of the time, the individuals that you're encountering, they may not be that far down the rabbit hole on shadow work, and that's okay. I kind of prefer
here's
to
the
be.
thing. I think shadow work needs a new PR person. That
I
speaks
do
to my training
too.
because I'm like
I
PR
do.
communications. This is actually what I studied. And it's
Yeah.
funny how we end up where we belong. So you want to hear irony about about making the right choice on a societal or like logical level.
Yeah.
I ended up that route because I did that route right up until I was 30 something, 33,
Yeah.
magical number. And I made the route of, well, this will make me money, and this will the next rung of the ladder. Well, this will be
Yep.
the right thing, and that's the right thing to do. Now, that word, the right thing, was heavily weighted with expectation and societal
Oh,
shit and where I should be.
oh yeah.
That being said, I hear you offering people this other option, and they're like, yeah, but I'll choose the settling option. So here's what I want people to know. And I think you want them to know this too, is
Yeah.
that there are no mistakes and that there are no accidents. And like, even though I chose that, I still ended up, now get this, I still ended up working as a communications director, marketing communications, investor relations,
Yes.
helping to transmute or translate complicated language around energy. I was in the energy sector
I love it. I love it.
into pedestrian language to make it
Yes.
accessible so that
Yeah.
people would invest.
Yes. Okay.
They would invest in the energy. And so I was very like marketing, and I have an office and I'm in Vancouver, and I'm just like, I've got all the things, and I even got a husband, and then I'm going to get, have a family, like right up until, but so I was on, it was so funny. Isn't it so funny to see the hints, the layers of what is
Yeah.
authentic to where I think I'm meant to be, which is I
Yep.
think where I am now,
Yes.
but how it was still revealing and seeping. So we could say your wounds aren't healed and they'll bleed through all the fabric, and everyone will, it'll still show up in your everyday life until you heal it. Well, guess
Mhm.
what? Same goes for your potential. The
Oh
same
yeah.
goes for the thing that you're supposed to do, that it will
Yep.
bleed through and it will shine through every
Yes.
interaction and thing. So I just
Yep.
find that so, don't you all find that fascinating? Just in that example. And I see it all the time with people I work with. I'm like, don't you find that interesting that, you might be, doing this work to either help organize someone's house, and really a lot of stuff we're working on is helping put things back in better order for you, and
Yeah.
they're just like, what the heck, like all of a sudden they
Yeah.
look at all the things that have played out, and they're like, I've been playing this out in my life but not knowing how it's connected to the inner
Yep.
work. So
Yep.
your intuitive highway, which is that's how I talk about intuition, is that
Yeah.
I don't see intuition as one thing. I don't
Yeah.
see it as a gut. I mean, okay, I do and I don't. But like,
Yeah.
here's what killed me when I started opening up to the intuitive world and giving myself permission to be intuitive on a
Yeah.
professional level
There's a permission.
was
Yeah.
was well, it's a gut feeling, or it's I'm going to see things, and it's got to be this one thing, and it's got to be packaged, and maybe I even think it's got to look like how Ahsaki does it, or maybe it's got to look like Madame Cleo, or maybe it's got to look like John Edwards,
Right.
and mine doesn't. So I'm not that, so I can't be that. And what I sense and feel is just garbage, and because it's not as profesh, or it's not as polished, and I don't, whatever. Anyway, I'll forget that. So you just carry on. And I guess what I'm saying is that I believe intuition is more of, it's like a highway system. So I always kind of go like this. I always see like a clover leaf of like, highways, and there's this almost interconnectedness of it. And it can almost look like a bit of a, wow, that's a lot, like the LA, all these clover leaves
Yeah.
and like
Right.
multi-laned highways, like 10 lanes. What? Wow. And I see intuition as the highway,
Mhm.
and it is almost like an infrastructure that
Yes.
helps deliver information, but it's
Mhm.
not. So here's the other thing. I also don't think it's just one way, where we're this passive recipient that's like,
Mhm.
please, universe, send me the
Send
information,
me
because
something.
I'm speaking to myths that I've
Yes.
also carried.
Mhm.
I'm gonna wait, light a candle, put some yanni on, and hopefully it will just drop in. And that's not how I've learned what else it is.
Yeah.
And that the information, it doesn't just come from one source either. It can come from like, our body can send us intuitive information
Mhm.
into, it's like, and our mind can send through
Yep.
thoughts, ideas, our heart can deliver us information through emotions. This is
Yep.
all delivered through your
Yes.
intuition.
Mhm.
Guides, angels, dead loved ones, well, that's also another source. The earth, the planet,
Nature.
nature,
Yeah.
animals, holy shit, I could go on and on.
The ocean,
um
that's a whole other entity. Yeah. Mhm.
Situations,
All the
circumstances. There is
yeah.
information available to us all the time. And it doesn't want to overwhelm us. It wants to say, stay open, notice what you notice.
Love that.
You're going to get little hits, you're going to get little nudges, and intuition is very subtle. And if you don't understand or are open to the subtleties, guess what isn't subtle?
Mhm.
Ego, fear,
At all.
right? Anger. Like, I mean, anger, I wouldn't put, I would say fear, and I would say ego. Like
Mhm.
those things, they're not subtle at all.
No.
They're very specific, and they will tell you and they'll dominate a thought or a feeling. But it's almost like intuition comes up like the flower. Oh, now I'm messing with metaphors, sorry. But like it will almost pop up, and then like, like our conditioning and societal and expectations will like hammer it
Yep.
down.
Yep.
No, you're not supposed
Mhm.
to grow there. And it's like, boop, yes, I will. And it's just this internal tension.
Yes.
And that deserves your curiosity. That's all I think you and I are talking about,
Yes.
is like all you and I are just open up. What is it? What might it be? Let's have
Right.
that discourse and discussion so that you, as the holder of it, as the host, the
Yes.
center point of this multi, interconnected, intuitive, like
Yeah.
force, multi-force, right? Um, can help untangle some of the knots that can
Yeah.
happen and help clear the highways.
The
So
highway.
here's when you talk about shadow work, when I want to go back to when I said it needed PR work, but like to me, the shadow work is, it needs PR because nobody likes shadow, the word,
The
they
word.
don't like
Word.
darkness and stuff.
Yeah.
It's, it's like the stuff that gets in the way of the free flowing information.
I
And
like that. I like.
right.
Yeah. I
And
like
so
that.
like there's roadblocks, maybe there's something's fallen off of a truck and it's cluttered, you don't understand it. So it's just in the way. But I guess from my perspective, I'm in the business of helping people. What is that? What does it feel like, look like, sound like?
Yep.
Let's kick it around. Let's understand it. And then as a result of that exploration, maybe some
Yes.
expression, maybe there's some feelings there, whatever, it clears itself as a result of the process. And if that's what people want to call shadow work, well, fine. But it's not as heavy or as daunting or as scary as it
Yeah.
is marketed, which is really, it needs a whole overwork and like, to be reworked as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. In particular, in this 9 year where it really is all about visiting the self, soul work, shadow work, blah, blah, blah. It is a complicated sell. You're right. Nobody wants to hear the word shadow. So I love this symbolism, and I'm visually seeing it as you describe it, of this four-leaf clover, all of the traffic, and really just removing those little barriers.
So things can move.
Yeah.
Like
So
it doesn't want to be so traffic jams. Guess
yeah.
what traffic jams feel like? Anxiety. Do you want
Yep.
to know why you get anxiety? Because you haven't blocked the things that just want that information to move. You haven't acknowledged it. You don't want to. And
Yep.
we have these assumptions because it feels bad in our body.
Yep.
It is bad.
Right. And that's not
Oh,
always.
guess what? Not just it is bad, we're bad. Do you
Yep.
see how we literally trickle it down? If
Yes.
something feels bad, well, it is bad, but that means I am bad for having,
Yep.
not for having the feeling, but that we are the feeling.
Yes.
Man, does your soul, does the universe want more people to, maybe like you and I are talking right now, to help shift that perspective, to take that burden off of this
Mhm.
conversation. That is not true. You
Right.
having a feeling doesn't mean you are the feeling. It is simply blocks of energy, chunks of experiences that haven't either been addressed,
Yeah.
acknowledged, or like processed. So
Yeah.
it's unprocessed, it's unexplored stuff. And so that's what blocks the highway. So it's, here's what I want to say about this. The more you invest in that process, and back me up
Yeah.
on this anyway, from your angle,
Yeah.
the more you invest in the acknowledging the traffic, notice how much there is. And like, but here's the thing. Do you have to figure it all out in one go? No, you're going to go to the car that's on fire, or you're going to go to the one that
Right.
calls your name more. It might not be on
Mhm.
fire. Again, I'm probably promoting like shadowy shit work, but like, it doesn't have to be that awful, but the one that intuitively feels like, I don't know why, but it feels like I need to go here next.
Yep.
And to be the container holder that helps you move through that and go and
Yes.
trust, that's you trusting
Yes.
the instinct, and then realizing, do you realize when you went there and we cleared that, how it cleared 10 other fucking things without
Right.
even going there because that held the key? But until
Yeah.
you get into that process, you wouldn't trust it, because why would you?
No,
Because it's too
no.
daunting and it's too
It
scary.
sounds scary. Yeah, it sounds scary and it sounds like you're being forced into change or somebody's trying to make you change something and you like this, I want it to stay the way it is so I can stay comfortable. But yeah, that's what most shadow work is simply scary and that's really literally why most people don't do it. Because the idea of having to confront whatever awful thing that was, whether it is something as simple as a hangnail or something as catastrophic as, my parents abused me as a child, whatever the thing is, most people do not want. I learned this in hypno. Most people see revisiting these things as actual death. Psychologically, that's how we intuit and interpret going back to look at old incidents,
That
old
it
movies,
will kill me.
that it will
It
kill
will
me.
destroy me because I've
Yep.
already lived through it once. I don't want to live through it again.
Yep.
And but again, none of those beliefs are like, when you leave that unexplored and just leave it where it is, it will be what that is. It will
Right.
remain that way and it won't. So maybe, we can open up some, like, what you know that to be.
Yeah.
Like, do you believe, like, what do you know to be true about that? Because I have thoughts about that. When people are like, I understand people not wanting to go in because they think it's going to kill them. They may not say that, but the
Yeah.
feelings in them say, don't go there, that will
I don't
kill
want to do
us.
this.
And
Yeah.
here's what I've said, and I'd like to hear your perspective, which is, yes, that is true. Something will die, but it's not you. Like, you're the one that will survive.
Yes.
Guess what will die? You know, the feelings, and I say die meaning change. Oh
Yes. All.
man, now we're getting into that, because
Mhm.
I now understand death to be a more of a change than a loss, which
Right.
is a whole other
Like
conversation.
the
But
card.
that death is
Yep.
changing form. And
Transition.
that's, so there is a death, but it's like a loss of burdens you've been carrying, energy that no longer wants to be in you and burdening you and holding
Right.
you back. So,
Yeah.
but there can be a loyalty to it, or an identification, like we've identified with it so much and we've connected with it and built a home. And it's so insidious and kind of sick, like, where you're like, God, it's like this very confusing. Yes, I want it gone, but at the same time, who will I be if it's not there? Like, there's just,
That's the other
and
part.
so I think we're going right to the center of it as to why we don't. And I want to normalize that so people realize, what if that's what might be going on? And if we did, I just feel like if we did more things in groups, or saw the work being done more, it would
Hmm.
normalize the process of many deaths, of how things get transmuted
Hmm.
from pain into a more purposeful understanding. And it's through the process of willingness to understand it. It's like
Yeah.
interpreting what we experienced as children, let's say, that's one example. And
Right.
then through adult eyes, seeing it as it also wants to be seen. So there's just a little shift of perspective to go,
Hmm.
oh, I couldn't have seen that part. It's like, no, you couldn't have. You were 6, and
Right.
now you're
Exactly.
46.
Right. So now that's
So
what you
you're
want
being
to
given
do.
the gift to see another angle,
Yeah.
not to make it not bad. It was bad.
Yeah.
It's to help you understand a bit more.
Hmm.
Mostly not your fault. Mostly you were never not worthy. Mostly you are always of value, and humans are human, and people don't know, and all these things that get to
Yeah.
unfold, but in the process. And that, I think the more you explore that, the more you build trust that that you do get sort of, it's like a beach ball, right? You
Yeah.
go in, it always, we're buoyant by nature.
We
And
really
that the
are.
spirit, like, there's always something that will lift us back up and
Hmm. Yep.
pace the whole thing. And until you experience that, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go down with the ship. And I'll be like, you'll see, you won't. You'll see
Right.
something funny will happen, or something you'll pop up, and like, we'll have a good laugh after a good cry. And then it's like, or whatever, it's so, we don't know, but it's an intuitive process. And I
Yes.
think it's that journey from the head into the heart, the body, the soul.
Yeah. I think you're hitting on something super duper important because people giving themselves the freedom to walk through any process is usually the biggest bullet to bite. once they get past that part, like once they actually go, okay, yeah, I'm gonna actually take a look. Even talking to me, and this doesn't happen as much now because my filtration system is a lot better, but there has always been, a crowd that comes in and they're really just exploring, trying to figure out those same individuals who might push back on shadow work or be fearful about doing shadow work are usually the same individuals who are balking during during a psychic reading when you're giving them stuff that's way out there in the ethers and they're like, yeah, no, that doesn't match with anything on my planet right now. And it's what all of that, and you said this earlier too, what all of that is about control, is about our willingness to be able to let go and let God just allow the process to unfold. We are so often, we're a society that's very, and I mean this across the board, no matter what country you live in, we're a society that's very much built on results. Everything about our life. You said it earlier when you were talking about the career and that world. And it's like, I'm doing all, it's like a tick sheet, like we're checking off all the boxes. I've got this great career, I've got the kids, I've got a husband, I've got this, it's all coming together. And therefore, the world will think I'm a progressive human, right? Like I'm doing
That
all
all
the things
belong, that all have made
that
it,
I
that all
belong,
have made it, and all
and
did the
I
thing
will
that
have
we're all
made.
supposed to do,
Yep, that's the
Yeah.
big one. That's what people really see. And even to this day, I listen to more, especially women, talk about accomplishment and achievement. And these are always the things in the lineup. And simultaneously, many of these same women don't really want kids. May or may not actually want a husband, but they don't always get that right away. I've been in the same category. My 30s were mired with, well, I have to accomplish these two things. And then I hit 40 and thought, "Hey, like, why? I'm not sure that this is even what I want. Like, why do I keep shoving this down my own throat? Because it's what we're told is normal. It's because it's what we see everywhere. So naturally, we're always striving in that direction. It's ironically, it's the very same shadow work where we start to reveal ourselves to ourselves that gets us to the truth of, is this really what I want? This is also where we start to veer off the path of what looks like the norm. Every single one of us, it's really interesting. This is very interesting to me. And the longer I watch, the more this is the case. People who are grossly immersed in their shadow work are all neurodivergent.
What do
How
you
would
mean by
you know?
grossly immersed in it?
Meaning we're on that path. It's something that we believe strongly in do, or just believe that we need to be doing for ourselves, so
Oh,
we
right.
look for those opportunities, for in whatever method it may come, whether it's working with a psychic, working with a shaman, whether it's
Yeah.
medicine, coaching, therapy, whatever it may
Mhm.
be. But you're driven towards that. You're
Yeah, you're attracted, you're being invited to, and you're answering the call,
and you're
is what I'm
answering the
hearing.
call.
Yeah.
Exactly. Those folks on the whole typically are all in some form or variation neurodivergent. Why? Because their intuition is stronger, and intuition is not leading us back to the matrix. Why would it be? It wouldn't make any sense. Like all our soul wants to do is exactly the formula we've been told. No, that's the entire point. But I don't think a lot of people recognize that. And I mean, even conventional folks who still work a 9 to 5 may have a corporate job. But if they're immersed in their shadow work, the way they approach the world, Steve Jobs is a good example, is very neurodivergent
I
because
think,
they're led by their soul.
well, and what I heard intuitively when you were talking about that was to talk about personal responsibility. And I'm like, what? Like,
Okay.
well, to me, I guess what I'm hearing you say is that there's this element of taking full ownership, which I mean, I'm here to hold space for that. So I'm just like, all right, like, is that when you take, oh man, okay, when you fully own your life, warts and all, when you
Hmm.
are willing to say, okay, this is my life, this is how it feels, and I'm not saying it's supposed to feel good, but
Hmm.
there's parts that do, parts that don't. And when you're answering, when I said answering the call, they're like, this is what when you're answering the call, they just said the call's coming from within the house, like that
I like
classic,
that.
right? Oh man, like, it's like, right? Oh
Mhm.
my God. To me, this is fast. I nerd out on this, right? But so it's a good thing I'm doing this work. But like, and I get excited about it because I know
Yes.
the outcome. I know the outcome and I don't know the specifics, but I know the feeling. I know the expansion. I know the freedom. I know all those things. But like neurodivergent, if you're noticing that, I think that's fascinating. But it's just like, to me, that just speaks of like, well, this is my life. This is how I feel. These are the things that I'm noticing. Well, that's
Mm-hmm.
mine to respond to. That's mine to get curious about. That's mine to untangle.
Yep.
Um, it just feels like there's must be some sort of either intuitive awareness of that and answering that call. But
Yeah.
guess what I also know? I also know there are things crossing their path that are also in. And okay, so have you heard of the telepathy tapes? All
No.
right. Okay, we're gonna have to like do part two or
Deeply
something.
intrigued.
So the telepathy tapes are a series of tapes that I learned about on TikTok. But like that doesn't want to diminish it. In fact, TikTok is just such an amazing place, I think. And we can talk about that another time. But it's like it's just an incredible, diverse resource of just dynamic information. Some of it, yes, misinformation, of course, but discernment, people,
Right.
discernment,
Exactly.
and mental health. When a lack of mental health meets TikTok, well, it's not great news. But that's with anything. But
Right.
I digress.
Exactly.
So the telepathy tapes are they're a podcast. It's a podcast, and it's a series of interviews and exploration about neurodivergent and children on the spectrum,
Mhm.
nonverbal in particular, nonverbal children with autism.
Okay.
So bottom line, I'm not going to ruin it, but what they're learning is that these children, these human beings, are beyond gifted to the point where they read minds, and they're
Mm-hmm.
proving it with these
Mm-hmm.
telepathy tapes. So they have
Mm-hmm.
all these, basically it's scientific, it's research based,
Yeah.
it's very it's like legitimized, it's very like funded and founded in a very sane like
Oh,
practices and practitioners, and it's just mind-blowing. Like
yeah.
the children literally can read the minds of their parents, and they're proving this. So anyone listening, to have your mind blown, what I'm saying is there are things that are being presented and rising up in society, rising up to our awareness outside of us and inside of us, that are
Yeah.
showing us that the walls are crumbling,
That's
right?
it.
That the structures, that what we once thought, what children who are once institutionalized, God forbid, maybe still currently in
Yep.
one way or another, or marginalized
Yes.
communities, or it's like that there is more going on. There's a what else is actually going on. And only through curiosity are they discovering this superhuman gift, this
Mhm.
miracle, by all
Yep.
means,
Yep.
is present in something that we would disregard and put in a corner.
Yep.
And it just speaks to
Absolutely.
the fact that it's all being broken up, all of this structure, all of these like shoulds and expectations, and that this is the world we're living in right now. And how important it is that you and I are talking about this, because there's a call home to go
Yeah.
back into the house, answer the call, notice your hallways. You got Lego in your hallways you're going to step on and hurt yourself. That's your business. Like, that's your business to clean it up. Like, I don't want to step on Lego. I'm sorry, I really mess with metaphors a lot, but from super highway to like your hallway.
It's all good. I'm tracking with you. This is
But
good.
like to me, it's just permission to get curious about our own goddamn gifts.
Yeah.
That each person has intuition. It's whether or not you give it the time of day, or you're even interested in
Yeah.
learning how yours works.
Yep. And I think a lot of the time, and I think we're going to see a resurgence of something kind of an odd energy. There's a lot of people going back home to religion. It's not necessarily doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Oh, I
In
know,
fact,
I
it
know.
could be magnificent. A lot of the people who are returning to religion, though, are doing so out of fear. And it's like, oh, Armageddon has begun. Let's hurry up and go back to what we know, right? Go back to the Matrix, go back to whatever the standard was. And this is the thing that's familiar. This is the thing I knew in childhood. Which would be awesome if the God spark was happening at the same time. But what I see is a lot of people going back to religion, rejecting all notions of holistic. Doreen Virtue is a really good example of that. And then I see other folks, Russell Brand, what's his
Russell Brand, I'm like, we gotta talk. Yeah, that's a
I'm
great.
like,
Or even
okay,
Trump,
guys.
saying that all of a sudden he's a Christian.
Isn't it like compelling to watch them like one by one where they're like, I'm born again. I'm like, yeah,
It's like a new beard. It's like a
okay.
new version of a beard, you know?
It really is. And I can tell there's going to be a lot more folks as we watch these things happen on the planet. This is a prediction. I guarantee there's going to be a lot more folks going back to Christianity, Catholicism, Islam because it feels safe for them.
Hmm.
I would love that
Hmm.
if at the same time people were then understanding their religion the same way we introduce intuition to people and say, okay, this has always been in there, right? Let me show you the sparks and all the ways it's been a part of your life and how you can ignite it in yourself now and how you can utilize this as a tool. Religion can be used the same way. My hope for everyone who's returning home to religion is that they're bringing all the knowledge with them that they've acquired in the last 20, 30, 40 years so that they can compare and contrast and see where that information actually fits in. That would be magical to me. I have a feeling, though, a lot of folks are simply just going to go back to their religion. And what I'm seeing is a lot of these folks rejecting the notions of, tarot, intuition, all things that are
As devil's business,
as
as like
devil's business.
tools
And
of
I'm
the
like, oh, wow.
devil,
And what
fruits
I think
of the devil.
the other part that I would be really curious about is even in the telepathy tapes, when they get to the genetic part of how who kids with autism, there's specifics in the X genes that they're going to start talking about this in mass. You heard when you were in Morocco, do you remember me saying everybody's going to be looking for their black auntie at some point in their collective lineage because we're going to start hearing things about X genes. We're going to start hearing things about melanin, which the Irish people have more of than you realize. My point in all of that is some of this is actually in our DNA. They're going to slow talk this, but we already know this to be true. The autism piece is really tying that in, though, in such a magnificent way because it
Mhm.
really speaks to a population that is disenfranchised in many ways. Our education system is not set up, unless they're going to a Montessori, they're really not. Our education system is not set up to really properly accommodate these. And I've said this in class actually that I've always thought kids with Down syndrome, kids with autism are closer to God. That's
Mhm.
literally how I phrased it. These people are a little bit closer to God, kind of like when you meet small children who are under the age of, say, 6. There's a certain connectedness that hasn't been distorted through their life experience for those who can't speak. I find psychically, again, I'm just going on what I intuit and what I've seen
Mhm.
psychically, I get the same impressions from populations like autism, Down syndrome, where there is a higher level of connectedness. And again, we're going to start talking chromosomes and genes at some point. I don't doubt that those tapes eventually
That
will.
they're going to start connecting those dots. I just think that's so specific. I feel like people are so not ready for that in some ways. Like
I
it
think
just
there's
feels
a,
so like narrowed down, and like I don't know. We're gonna
yeah.
fuck with it though. Like I just feel like you give humans some tools or some very specific things, and we just like cavemen. We're like bang bang, and then we break it. You know what I mean? And it's just so annoying.
I got a visual when you said that. I'm like, oh my God.
Like just fucking. Why can't we just? I don't know. So wow. You know what you reminded me of is that so Jill Bolte Taylor, she wrote a book called My Stroke of Insight, and she was a neurologist. I'm gonna get this wrong, but anyway, she was like really effing smart woman, works at Harvard, teaches at Harvard, all neuro brain, how the brain works. Now
Yeah.
she got into that because why did she get into that profession? Her brother has schizophrenia. And so do you see the motivating factor that led her or that inspired that choice? Now we could maybe she shouldn't have because maybe that wasn't her choice. Well, guess what? Doesn't matter. That's where she ended up. So she ended up studying the brain, how the brain functions. So she ends up telling her story. Go look her up, TEDx talk, Jill Bolte Taylor. I'll put a link in the show notes for her TED talk. And she describes having a stroke. She is like one of the only people on the planet who was given the gift of having a stroke consciously. She tracked it, she paid attention, she remembered every single moment and survived, recovered to then
Okay.
deliver to the world what she learned. Now, what I'm getting at is, and how it lines up to what you were talking about, is that she lost function of her entire left hemisphere. I think it's the left. the one that does the logic, the one that is essentially the mail room with all the cubby holes, with all the slots and all the labels and all of the structure. Gone. What she was left with was pure existence, pure, pure consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where when she looked at her hand, her hand got so distorted, it started to look like a weird claw. Like her body started changing.
Fascinating.
Now, people, again, I would say people in her profession would maybe be like, that's the neurons doing that, and that's why. But the irony that she's now the one talking about this and legitimizing, like she talks about how she was opened up into a limitless, expansive, basically her soul. She was essentially became the horizon. I always say it's like where you unzip, become a color again, and you are one with everything. And what was happening is she was opening up to that expansiveness, and then her left brain would come back on and her hand would go back. So this happened multiple times where she was expanded into the the great expansion of everything, and then shoved back into her body. And a second later, anyway, she documents it, but she survives it and recovers to not only teach people about stroke, to teach people about recovery and the best ways to work with people with strokes, which was amazing. She was the one person that spoke through Oprah or to Oprah to say, take responsibility for the energy you bring into the room. Because she was able to come back and say, I couldn't talk, I couldn't walk, and nothing was in a box. But I knew as soon as someone walked in the room what their agenda was. She understood every aspect about their energy. She knew what their intentions were. She could practically read their mind, but not read their mind, because that wasn't how it was. It was an impression and an understanding, which was pure intuition. So she was shot into that channel of pure clarity. And she understood nurses that didn't like her, that didn't want to be there, that were not present. And the moment her mother walked in the room, she said it was like night and day. It was like a warm candle, just, it was just a warm home. And she was saying, check your energy before you enter the room. And she was being specific about stroke recovery. But you can see how that expands into everything.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So anyway, it just what you're getting psychically about, children with autism or on the spectrum, neurodivergence, openings of gifts and abilities, children with, special needs. We're being invited to open up to what else this is and what the opportunity is to honor, respect, support, all of these things. And it is breaking down just walls of resistance of what is, because they're not willing to see what else is there other than the surface story, which we've made mean, not right, not normal, not good, whatever. Oh man. I mean, I just feel like we went, I don't know, out into the ethers there.
Yeah, we've gone pretty advanced without question. And I know we had some very specific ideals. Yeah, we've gone pretty advanced.
Okay, this is going to be multiple parts. How can people connect with you, and what are you up to, and where people can find you and how you want to work with people right now?
Where to find me? AhsakiKai.com. What to find me in right now is the Ascension Project community. It is free to everyone, and it's all about learning more about your own gifts and being exposed to folks who have them. So if you need answers, that's the place to be.
I hope this first conversation with Ahsaki opened up some powerful insights into your own intuitive journey and how you approach your life, because we cover even more in part 2, which will be along shortly. If you're ready to explore your own intuition and your inner knowing, join me for the next round of Tap Into Trust Yourself. We start on January 26th, and I would love to see you there. Over 6 weeks, I'll guide you to explore and understand how your intuition works within you, so you can truly embody what it means to trust yourself on the deepest level. Together, we'll work to release years of self-doubt so you can make grounded, clear, and confident decisions moving forward. My goal is to leave you with simple, practical ways to tap into your intuition that bring life-changing insights, welcoming you back home to yourself, reconnected to your inner strength, and aligned to live the life you're meant to live. So if you've ever felt called to do this work but didn't know where to start, this is your chance. You can find all the details at Keri-Anne-Livingstone.com/tap-in. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, maybe share it with someone who might need to hear this stuff too. Stay tuned for part 2 next week. We're going to dive even deeper into how to align with your soul's wisdom and trust yourself in a way that changes everything. And if you have any questions for Ahsaki or me, feel free to reach out using the links in the show notes. See you soon.